Okay, I had to jump on a podcast to talk about the whole Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings situation with him leaving the team. And we are now going to blame the Vikings because if Sam Darnold had just stayed on the Vikings, this would have been Minnesota's chance. It would have been the Vikings in the Super Bowl. I'm here to tell you wrong. That is so wrong. And people that think that either don't watch football or don't understand how this works. If you watch the Seattle Seahawks team with how they're coached, with the players that they have around Sam Darnold and play calling, everything, the drafts that they've had, you cannot compare that organization to the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm talking to you as a Vikings fan. If you want to blame anybody, if you want to blame Kwesi, the GM for the Vikings, you can blame him. Oh, certainly. And I do think this is on Kwesi that the Vikings did not have a good season. And I think this is on Kevin O'Connell that the Vikings did not have a good season. But if you think that had they just re-signed and paid Darnold, that they would find themselves right now where the Seahawks are playing for the Super Bowl, in the Super Bowl, you're wrong. You're just wrong. You know why? Because last year you had that proof of concept. Last year, Sam Darnold, the same Sam Darnold, was on the Vikings roster. And I'm just going to tell you, the team around him is not comparable to the team around him now in Seattle. It's that simple. Look at the offensive lines. They're playing the Rams team, which Darnold has struggled against. He struggled against them this year as well in one of the games, right? But guess what? The Seahawks, Mike McDonald, didn't just tell Darnold, go out there and do the same thing and get sacked 6 times a game again. No, he adjusted. He had a running game. He called different plays. He put Jackson Smith and Jigma in the backfield. Like the offensive line played better. They have a defense who, when Darnold struggled and played horrible in that first matchup against the Rams, allowed the Seahawks to only lose by 2 because the defense kept showing up time and time again. So all the Vikings fans that are here saying, oh, if only we had Darnold, we would have been in the Super Bowl. You're just wrong. That is just wrong, okay? And we have the proof of concept. We've seen it. Also, keep in mind that's also the Vikings signed free agents this last season, right? That were supposed to shore up the offensive line. And the offensive line still can't sniff being as good of an offensive line as the Seattle Seahawks offensive line is. So, you can say they should have kept Darnold. That's fair. You can say that. That's fine. And I tend to disagree because of the holes in the roster. I think if you would have kept Sam Darnold and had to pay him $30 to $35 million, your team this year would have been even worse around Sam Darnold than it was last year. We saw it this year. The defense was great under Brian Flores down the stretch when they started playing bad teams like Washington without Jaden Daniels, like the Giants with Jackson Dart, like the Cowboys. Okay? So, yeah, the defense is good. I'm not saying the Vikings defense is not good, but they're not Seattle Seahawks caliber defense. The running game in the first couple weeks from the opposing teams gashed that Vikings run defense. They couldn't find their footing until like week 6 or 7 finally when they started playing better. How many turnovers did the Vikings cause this season to make you feel like, oh, man, these guys are always turning the teams over? No, they weren't doing that, right? So this was not a Seattle Seahawks style defense, okay? Special teams. Can we talk about special teams? Did you not see the Seahawks have a kickoff return to open up the game for a touchdown against the 49ers last week? How many kickoff returns for a touchdown did the Vikings have this year? How many special teams blunders have the Seahawks had? How many did the Vikings have? How many penalties on special teams did the Vikings have? Is this year's version of the Vikings a Super Bowl caliber special teams unit? No, it is not even close. Offensively, did Kevin O'Connell show you anything this season to tell you that he can orchestrate a top offensive unit with a struggling quarterback? No, he did not. All right. So I'm tired of seeing this narrative about had the Vikings just kept Darnold, they would be in the Super Bowl. It's just wrong. All right. And we just need to get that through our heads as Vikings fans. I tend to think that the right move was to move off Sam Darnold because the Vikings are so bad at drafting that they need that cap space to fill the holes that they haven't filled because of bad drafts. And that, I'm sorry, it's just factual. Look at the Seahawks drafts. Look at their first round pick, Emmanuel, from this year, making plays on defense, right? Where are the Vikings guys doing that? Where's the drafts that have turned out Pro Bowlers for the Vikings in recent years? So again, I'm with you that I'm blaming Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah as well, but not for not keeping Darnold. It's for not drafting well to the point where you could afford to keep Darnold. That's the real issue right there. And that is the most important thing, is that we both agree that we can blame the Vikings organization and Kwesi and the GM and the coaching, or let's just call it the GM. We all agree here, I think, that we can blame the Vikings GM, but we're blaming them for two different things. Okay, you're blaming him for not keeping Darnold. No, you keep Darnold and pay him 30-something million, and your team's going to be worse around him. And last year, with a better team around him, you couldn't even win a playoff game. You got blown out by the same Rams team that Darnold beat today. So what I'm blaming Kwesi for is not drafting well enough to the point where you could afford to pay Darnold. That's the real mistake. All right? For GMing to the point where you're trading a 4th-round pick for Adam Thielen, and the Seahawks are trading a 4th and a 5th-round pick for a wide receiver that's making plays and on special teams. That's what I'm blaming Kwesi for. All right? So, again, I couldn't stand seeing this narrative today that this would have and should have been the Vikings had they just retained Sam Darnold. It wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been. Stop lying to yourselves. All right? The only thing you can do now is move forward and hope that they can draft well this time around to at least maybe be able to either afford paying a guy like Joe Burrow if you trade for him, or to at least be able to build a good enough team around him to help a quarterback that's not this next season going to be top tier. I don't expect by any means JJ McCarthy, even if I do believe in JJ, which I do believe in JJ, but I don't at all see him being a Pro Bowl type quarterback this next year. I think he could be good and better than last year for sure with some experience, but you still need coaching around him and you need help around him. And if you don't do that with the draft, then you need that cap space to make it happen around him with free agents. So again, convincing yourselves that it's the quarterback's the only problem in Minnesota, it's just a lie. And at the same time, if you're crediting all the Seahawks success to Sam Darnold, then that's just foolish as well. You're discrediting a top defense in the league. You're discrediting a top special teams unit in the league. You're discrediting a top coaching staff who is Clint Kubiak on offense, along with Mike McDonald, had done a great job helping Darnold. And even when Darnold has struggled, they didn't just run it back and make the same mistakes, right? Last week, he threw 17 passes the whole game. How many times has Kevin O'Connell called a game that's been dominated by the run game where the quarterback only had to complete 12 passes? Like, look at the coaching. Look at the drafting. All right, so there's so many more holes with the Vikings for you to convince and lie to yourself to think that had they just retained Sam Darnold and paid him, that they would have been in the Super Bowl this year. So I'm not with it. And I just think that's so blatantly wrong and obviously wrong. And it's just making people bitter. Like, be happy for Sam Darnold's success. He would not have found that success this season, probably not even next season or years to come with what the Vikings are currently doing. All right? They're already in cap hell, the Vikings. Imagine what they would have been in had they been paying Darnold $35 million this next year. And after that, probably having to re-sign him to a big extension with this organizational structure of a GM and a coach. It wasn't happening, man. So don't kid yourselves. Good for Sam Darnold. It worked out for the better this way, because hopefully this gets the Vikings to realize that they got to either draft a lot better and figure it out and change their ways to get some actual impact players here through the draft on cheap contracts, or they need a new GM ASAP and coach, because I saw this same Sam Darnold go up against the Detroit Lions in week 18 last season and get rocked. And did he struggle? Yeah, he struggled. But sometimes your quarterback struggles, and that's where everybody else picks your team up. Darnold didn't play great every single game this season that the Seahawks won. He had some games where he struggled. I mean, coming up to this point against the Rams, He wasn't putting up lights out numbers, but they still found a way to beat him once in the regular season and beat him today. And today, guess what? Full circle moment. He played great. Why? Because it takes a team around him and a coach around him that can coach up the team around him to pick him up when he's not playing well. And that didn't happen in Detroit last year. And the very next week against the Rams, seeing how Darnold struggled, instead of helping him out and relying on the run game and relying on the defense that we are over here acting like is a Super Bowl caliber defense, where was that? The defense didn't look like that against the Rams last year in the playoffs, right? Kevin O'Connell didn't seem to have a new game plan suddenly where he was going to just pound the rock and take the ball out of Sam Darnold's hands and have him throw 17 passes and go 12 for 17 and rely on his running game and his defense. No, he went in it again thinking, I'm going to do, Darnold had a bad game. He'll be better this time. We'll run it back and do what we did against Detroit. And you got smacked again. And the offensive line, blame the O-line too. They were horrible against Detroit and they were horrible against the Rams. That's why one of the first things Kevin O'Connell said in the presser right after that Rams playoff loss was we need to address the interior offensive line. And guess what? They did, or they thought they did, because they paid a lot for free agents like Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, a center. They drafted Donovan Jackson, right? And guess what? Had they retained Sam Darnold, they weren't going to get Will Fries. Were they going to get Ryan Kelly or keep Garrett Bradbury, who, by the way, is starting in the Super Bowl next week or 2 weeks from now for the Patriots? Coaching, maybe? I'm just saying. Come on, guys. Enough with the lazy narrative. So that's that.